Hello, and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. My name is Dan. Joey has the night off. And for this episode, uh, even though Joey has the night off, we kind of talked about what we wanted to do, and we settled on a March Madness bracket that we are both going to fill out. And we actually created a Blue Shadow bracket challenge on the ESPN app, which will be linked wherever you get this, whether it be on YouTube or the podcast platform of your choice. Neither one of us know too much about basketball. I think I keep up with it a little more than Joey does, but this is just for fun and for bragging rights. So I'm gonna jump right into it. This is something we used to do at work when we worked together, and a tradition that we want to keep going forward. So I'm just going to jump right into it, starting in the South region, and that the first matchup is Auburn versus Alabama State or St. Francis of Pennsylvania. I think Auburn is the second best team in the country, and I think Auburn will take the win over the winner of the play-in. That next brings us to Louisville versus Creighton. I traditionally pick the nine over the eight always, and I think Creighton will win this game. I think they won the Big East. They beat St. John's in New York. Really big win for them on the road and in their conference title game. That follows up with Michigan and UC San Diego. I don't know much about UC San Diego. I watched about 10 minutes of their championship game. I think Michigan takes that game. That brings us to number 4 at Texas A&M against number 13 Yale. I think Texas A&M wins this game. Yale might be a good Cinderella story. I just don't think it'll be this year. And that brings us to Ole Miss versus South Dakota State, or excuse me, that might be San Diego State. I apologize. Or UNC. This is the first upset that I'm calling for. I think North Carolina will win the play-in game, excuse me. They will also beat Ole Miss. The SEC is very strong this year. I think they have 14 teams in out of the 64, but I think UNC pulls this game out. That brings us to Iowa State versus Lipscomb. I think Iowa State will beat Lipscomb, who is an automatic qualifier. And then for the 7-10 matchup in the South, I think Marquette, another Big East squad, will beat New Mexico. And finally, that brings us to number 2, Michigan State, and number 15, Bryant. I think Michigan State's going to win this game. I think they're just too good for Bryant. Okay, that brings us to the East. Starts with number 1 Duke versus number 16 American University or Mount St. Mary's in the play-in game. I mentioned how I think Auburn was the second best team in the country, and that's because I think Duke is the first, and I have Duke winning this game pretty easily. That brings us to another 8-9 matchup, and like I said before, I usually pick the nines, and I'm going to continue with that trend and take number 9 Baylor over 8 Mississippi State. Um, and that brings us to the number 5 versus 12 matchup, which is Oregon against Liberty. Big Ten had a decent season in basketball, and I think they will beat number 12 Liberty. This is an interesting matchup for me. My girlfriend and her family are very big Akron fans. They're from that area of Ohio, and they're matched up against number 4 Arizona. Uh, I think I'm going to take Akron as the upset. I think I have to take Akron as the upset. They just I did watch this, probably is the team I followed the most. They just came back from a 20-point deficit in their conference title game. So I think they had the momentum rolling into the tournament. That brings us to number 6 BYU versus number 11 VCU. I think Brigham Young will win this game. They got upset by my alma mater last year in the tournament, but I don't think they're going to get upset again. I think they will beat VCU. Uh, that brings us to number 3 Wisconsin versus number 14 Montana. I think Wisconsin had a pretty strong showing this year, especially in the Big Ten tournament, and I think they will beat number 14 Montana. Uh, that brings us to St. Mary's College in California versus Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt will pull the upset over St. Mary's. And finally, that brings us to Robert Morris at number 15 and number 2, Alabama. I think Alabama, even though they got upset in the SEC tournament, I think will beat Robert Morris, unfortunately, for the Colonials. Okay. That is bringing us to the West region. Eh, Starting with number 1 Florida versus number 16 Norfolk State. Florida just won the SEC tournament. They beat the team that uh, a lot of people are saying is very good and has a very good shot at the title. And I think they will start their title run against Norfolk State. In the 8-9 matchup, I am breaking with my tradition. I am taking number 8 UConn over 9 Oklahoma. UConn always has a pretty good squad, and I think they will beat Oklahoma this year. For the 5-12 matchup of the East region, it is number 5 Memphis versus number 12 Colorado State. Um, I'm taking Colorado State here. This is an upset, which might bust my bracket, but I think Colorado State has the momentum. They won the Mountain West. Memphis usually is pretty good, but I feel like Colorado State has a chance. In the 4-13 matchup, it's number 4 Maryland against number 13 Grand Canyon. I think number 4 Maryland will advance in that game. In the 6-11 matchup, it's number 6 Mizzou versus number 11 Drake. I'm also going to take the upset here. I think Drake has a good chance against Mizzou. I say that like I know. I have no idea. Purely guess here. I think Drake's going to, hopefully Drake wins. The 3-14 game, it's Texas Tech against UNC Wilmington. I think Texas Tech is going to win this game. Pretty good team. In the 7-10 matchup, it's number 7 Kansas, who I think was a preseason top 10, if not top 5, against number 10 Arkansas. I think Kansas's woes continue this year, and I think number 10 Arkansas will beat and upset the Jayhawks. And rounding out the East, it's number 2 St. John's versus number 15 Omaha. I think Omaha's a great story, but unfortunately St. John's is just playing too well right now. So I'm going to take number 2 St. John's. And our last bracket is the Midwest region. It's starting with number 1 Houston versus the number 16 Cougars. I think Houston will win this game. Houston always has a pretty good team, and I think they're going to start off strong. And that brings us to the 8-9 in the Midwest of Gonzaga versus Georgia, respectively. And I think number 9 Georgia will upset number 8 Gonzaga. In the 5-12 matchup, I think between number 5 Clemson and number 12 McNeese, I think I'm going to take McNeese in the upset over number 5 Clemson. I think we need a couple Cinderellas, and I think that just makes it more fun to watch. In the 4-13 matchup of number 4 Purdue versus number 13 High Point, I'm taking the Boilermakers. Responded well after losing Zach Edey, and I think they're going to win their first game. And that brings us to number 6 Illinois versus the winner of the play-in game of number 11 Texas or number 11 Xavier. This is a pretty strong game, and I think the winner of the play-in game will also beat number 6 Illinois. In the 3-14 matchup in the Midwest, we have the number 3 Kentucky Wildcats and the number 14 Troy Trojans. I think the Wildcats are going to, unfortunately for Troy, have a nice first round. In the 7-10 matchup of UCLA versus Utah State, never been a big UCLA fan, so I'm taking Utah State to win over the Bruins. And finally, rounding out the Midwest, number 2 Tennessee Volunteers versus the number 15 Wofford, I think Terriers. I'm taking the Vols. They just upset Auburn in the SEC tournament, who many thought was the best team in the country, and they lost to a really good Florida squad. Okay, so that brings us to the round of 32. Try and speed this up a little bit for everybody. Number one Auburn versus number nine Creighton. I think Auburn's the better team, and I think they have a very good shot at winning. Number five Michigan versus number four A&M. I'm taking the Wolverines. I'm banking on UNC here versus Iowa State. I think UNC's luck runs out, and I'm taking the Cyclones. And rounding out the South region, between Marquette and Michigan State, I'm taking Michigan State. In the East, number one Duke versus number nine Baylor. Give me the Blue Devils. Number five Ducks versus the Zips. Give me Oregon. I think Akron's Cinderella ends here, unfortunately. Number six BYU versus number three Wisconsin. Has been playing very well as of late. Give me the Badgers. And in the SEC matchup, I think Alabama redeems their football team and beats Vanderbilt. In the West, I think number one Florida will beat the number eight Huskies. I think Maryland will beat Colorado State. Texas Tech will beat Drake. And St. John's will beat Arkansas. In the Midwest, I think the number one seed Houston will beat Georgia. Purdue will beat McNeese. And Kentucky will beat the winner of Texas or Xavier. And then I think Tennessee will beat Utah State. In the Sweet 16, I have Auburn beating Michigan and Duke beating Oregon, as well as I'm going to take Iowa State here over Michigan State, and I'm going to take Wisconsin over Alabama. In the West, I have Florida beating Maryland and St. John's Cinderella story or storybook story, whatever you want to call it this year, comes to an end against Texas Tech. And I think Kentucky is going to lose to Tennessee, and Houston will beat Purdue. Okay. In the Elite Eight, I'm taking in the South, I'm taking Auburn over Iowa State and Duke over Wisconsin. And I'm taking Florida and number two are over Texas Tech and number two Tennessee. I do think there will be three SEC teams in the finals this year. The SEC is a very, very good conference this year, and I would not be surprised if three SEC teams make it. That being said, I'm taking Florida over Auburn, but I'm taking the Duke Blue Devils over Tennessee. And while I was saying how the SEC is such a good conference this year, I do not think they pulled out. I think the Duke Blue Devils will win the NCAA tournament this year. Please let me know if you agree with my picks, disagree with my picks. I don't blame you if you disagree with my picks. I disagree with my picks. But please do, if you are interested, join the Blue Shadow podcast NCAA tournament challenge. The link to join is in the description below. And if it does ask for a password, the password will be Blue Shadow Pod, which will also be in the description. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please feel free to give us a like, follow, or subscription on the podcast platform of your choice. I hope you guys have a really good night, and we will see you guys soon.